Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our council meeting, ordinary council meeting, which is held here today at Omeo Recreation Reserve, Park Street, Omeo. On behalf of council, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting here today and pay our respect to their elders past, present and future. I'd like to first start with thanking the CEO and the East Gippsland Shire staff for getting the chamber set up and enabling us to have this meeting here today. This is a history-making meeting in the history of East Gippsland Shire. It's a momentous day. This is the first ordinary council meeting held back here in Omeo since amalgamation and the formation of East Gippsland Shire some 25, 26 years ago. I thank my colleagues for supporting this initiative in taking some of our council meetings back out to our communities, and also the additional effort, also for our colleagues to understand the additional effort that the councillors that attend our meetings down at the corporate centre week in, week out, some of the things that they need to do to get down there. East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcast to enhance the accessibility of its meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are also archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. At the appropriate times during the meeting, any members of the gallery who are addressing the council will have their image, comments or submissions recorded. Please ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are turned off or on silent mode for the duration of the meeting. So item 1.2.
Councillor Pels is an apology, a late apology.
Item 1.3, declaration of conflicts of interest.
There have been no declarations of conflict of interest received, Mr Mayor.
Item 1.4 is the confirmation of the ordinary council meetings held on the... Sorry, no, jumped ahead. Next meeting is the ordinary council meeting dated Tuesday the 1st of May to be held at the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street.
Confirmation.
Sorry, I was on 1.4, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on Tuesday the 6th of March 2018 be confirmed. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Roberts, thank you. Any questions? I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, next meeting is the ordinary council meeting on the 1st of May. Any requests for leave of absence? 1.6. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to request leave for next Tuesday, the 1st of May, 2018. Thank you.
So the next ordinary council meeting is Tuesday, the 1st of May. That's what he's requested.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Roberts. So we need a mover. Move, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Second, Councillor Toohey. No further questions. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 1.7 is public question.
Mr Mayor, we've received 5 public questions. The first public question is from Mr Lee Fulton of Omeo. The Omeo mountain bike plan is the most exciting thing to happen in years and has galvanised the community as it is seen as a key major cog in mountain bike trails in Victoria, attracting visitors to try all trails in the state. The community of Omeo is grateful for the council's support
just prior to Christmas, an application with $1 million. Show council commitment of $1.5 million to develop stage 1 of that the decision on that funding application, or the outcome of the decision on that funding application, will become known to roughly 4 weeks or sometime in May. So we're hopeful that we'll get a positive response to our application. Additionally, council staff have also been meeting with representatives of Regional Development Victoria, also seeking further funding to complete subsequent stages of that project.
Thank you, Mr Holt.
The second question is from Mr Lee Fulton of Omeo. It is my understanding that there was an audit by Council of Omeo street signage with the emphasis on tourist directional signs. Has this been completed? Is Council able to update the Wine and Gold Drive signs in the Swiss Creeks and Omeo townships to include schematic maps and distances? I'll ask Mr Waits to answer that question.
In response to the Omeo Street signage audit, I can't answer just off the cuff whether that has been completed, but I'm certainly happy to respond to Mr Fulton, so I'll take that question on notice at this point in time. With respect to updating other tourist signage in Swiss Creek and Omeo, I'm more than happy to talk to my Vic Roads counterparts and see what can be done there for improvements.
This next one from Mr Jeff Cooper of Omeo. Shire rates, municipal, water, etc. I thought the GST return to the state was supposed to cover these charges, e.g. 3 HCR radio station run by volunteers, CW Hall, kindergarten. I'll ask Ms Bennett.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. I'm not aware either of any plan under which GST would cover those charges. In terms of community-led organisations where rates are an issue, there's a couple of options through which relief can be garnered. One is to object to the valuation on which rates are based, and the other one is to apply directly to council for some rate relief, but unfortunately that won't be coming from the GST angle. Thank you.
The next question is from Rhonda Manhire of Omeo. Rhonda did ask a question about Livingston Park, and that report is to be tabled a little bit later. The first question, point will stage 2 of the Omeo streetscape, Day Avenue, be commenced? Short Street to Sebastopol Hill Road, and I'll actually put the second question because I'll ask Ms Nelson to answer both of these. Short Street, Commissioners Gully, off Day Avenue car park area and bus turning option. This would allow the school buses to be taken off Day Avenue away from the school crossing and provide a much safer option for the children. Tourism would benefit as tour coaches could park on this flatter section of Omeo close to the historical precinct and shops. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, my recollection is that with the Omeo streetscape plans, which were done quite a number of years ago, is that we have actually completed 2 stages already. So we were able to obtain funding for the main part of Day Avenue and then extending out to the turnaround area, which was funded part by council and part by the Victorian government. There are other stages that are planned. Stage there is no commencement date. Further work on the Omeo streetscape isn't part of council's 10-year capital works plan at this point in time. And the focus of funding in Omeo is more in respect to Livingston Park, mountain biking and the connections between the CBD and the benefits that can be derived from that, and not on streetscape funding. It is worth noting that streetscape work that we do across the Shire, it has been substantially funded by both council and the Victorian government, and at the moment it's not easy to find funding sources for streetscape works under the current Victorian government's programs for regional development. So it will be a case of understanding how we can continue to do staged streetscape updates over the next few years without that external funding source. And in respect to Short Street and Commissioners Gully, the question is, do we have any firm plans to pipe Commissioners Gully and create an extra parking manoeuvring space? And I have to be honest and say we don't have any firm plans, but certainly willing to understand what is being proposed and see whether that might be part of a future streetscape upgrade in that part of Omeo.
Thank you. The last question is from Danny Johnson of Tongio Road, Omeo. Why am I not provided with access to my property from Tongio Road? Told it has to be at my expense. Why, when I moved into my property and found no recycle bin, I was told that I must replace it at my expense? Mr. Waits.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. With respect to waste bins, any properties within a curbside collection district are provided with waste bins. Unfortunately, at times when there's a change of ownership of those properties, every now and then bins go missing and council require the new property owner to purchase a replacement bin if no bins exist at that time. The property owner can write in once they've paid for and acquired the bin and ask for a review of the fee if they believe there's some exceptional circumstances that should be considered. With respect to road access, I understand this is a property within the township itself, so it's a bit surprising that there's no road access, but I'll certainly take the opportunity while I'm here after the meeting today to go and have a look, and then I'll be able to respond to Mr. Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waits. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Item 1.8.1 is assemblies of councillors. We have a recommendation on that report.
Sure.
Moved Councillor Reeves, seconded Councillor Roberts. Any questions? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 1.9, Mr. CEO, any petitions?
There's a notice of motion from Councillor Roberts.
1.9, we're up.
Sorry, no petitions.
Item 2.1 is notice of motion, number 1, 2018, mining project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is that Council write to the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, and respectfully request that the environmental effects statement development in respect of the Fingerboards mineral sand mining project be subject to an independent third-party review upon its release. Rationale is concern has been expressed by members of the community both in Glenullardale District and more broadly across the Shire in respect of the proposed mineral sands mining project in the area known as the Fingerboards. The project an environmental effect statement is currently underway, and of particular concern is whether the sand mining project has the potential to impact negatively on existing farming activities in the immediate area, including the Lindenow Valley. Whilst the EES process will involve a final review by an expert panel prior to the project being submitted to the Minister for determination, it may allay some community fears and concerns if the resultant EES was reviewed by an independent third party. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. It's so moved by Councillor Roberts. We have a seconder for that motion. Councillor Buckley. Speakers?
Thank you. You want me to speak?
No, nothing further to add apart from the rationale there.
So, Councillor Buckley, as a seconder, would you like to speak to?
I think I agree with Councillor Roberts on the matter, and I fully support him. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Any further speakers? If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Oh, sorry, I didn't get a chance to speak.
Oh, against.
Don't worry, I'll put it to the vote.
Further speakers? Councillor Ellis.
Sorry?
Yeah.
You took to the vote, Mr. Mayor.
I did ask for speakers.
Yeah, I know, and then
Yep.
you went straight to the vote.
All those in favour?
Thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor.
Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.1, deferred business.
There's one item deferred business, Mr. Mayor, the East Gippsland Planning Scheme Amendment C 126, implementation of the Paynesville Maritime Precinct Master Plan, and that will come back at a further meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that update, Mr. CEO. Item 4 is councillor reports, and Councillor Toohey, would you like to start?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only have a very short report which I've sent in for nearly 2 weeks during Anything to add? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tui. Councillor O'Connell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. March is a busy month up in the Omeo region. We have the Labor Day weekend races, the High Country Calf Sales, the Rodeo over Easter and the Tambo Valley races and polo. But what I really wanted to talk about quickly today is the importance of this meeting held in Omeo today. I'm really proud to be part of the council, which has introduced council meetings outside of the corporate centre in Bairnsdale. As the Mayor alluded to, the meeting hasn't been held in Omeo since amalgamation, and the crowd in the gallery is testament to the importance of council getting out and about. Provides an opportunity for the communities outside of Bairnsdale to come along and be part of the council meeting, ask questions and engage in local issues. It's an important step in demonstrating the Shire's commitment to all areas of East Gippsland. And just to add to that, East Gippsland Water have also seen the importance of getting outside Bairnsdale with their monthly meeting being held in Omeo recently too. And with the live streaming now up and running, council meetings are more accessible than ever. So well done to everyone involved in making this happen today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, councillors, and good afternoon everybody gathered here. It is a real pleasure to be up here in the High Country, and I acknowledge Councillor O'Connell's words about this being the first meeting since amalgamation, it's really tremendous. I have a report which has just disappeared off my screen. There it is again. And I will just dwell on one item in particular for the sake of expediency, and that is the Working with Wood exhibition at Orbost Exhibition Centre. Please go and have a look. It is fantastic. It's a real tribute to the dynasties, not just families, the dynasties who have been working in those forests, in that industry for over 100 years. It's really well worth going and having a look at. And also I congratulate the new Committee of Management at the Orbost Exhibition Centre and the Orbost Historical Society for their convergent work to bring this together. So ladies and gentlemen, come to the High Country, come to the beach and go and have a look. It's fantastic. My report will be submitted to the councillor's assistant. So thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Roberts.
Nothing to report from me this month, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A convoy of very heavy trucks, drilling trucks. They went through Brenambra yesterday afternoon and headed out towards the mine site. However, that was not their destination. They are involved in the exploration of deep geological structure of the Great Dividing Range, which is a federal initiative. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it quite short and sharp, as others have done. A very busy month this month. A couple of highlights included the arts programs that I attended throughout the Shire, which are detailed in my written report. Participating in the re-energised Timber Towns Advocacy Group, which was able to hold its first annual meeting for some time, and I'd like to Shire on the far side of the state for their energies and appointment as chair of this group. A highlight for me and live experience was attending and presenting to the Australian Commonwealth Senate Committee with impacts on climate change, on coastal communities and infrastructure, held in Melbourne as a member of the Australian Coastal Councils. I was able there to promote not only the national body's position, but identify challenges for our own Shire as a separate entity. I further attended the Australian Coastal Council's workshop, forum and conference in Geelong this year. The speakers and topics are a particularly high standard this year, and as is appropriate, copies of the presentations will be provided to councillors and officers in the coming week. I have a number of other matters, but they can be read in the minutes. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of events that I attended. On Saturday the 17th of March, there was a group of disabled and able-bodied members of our community that were paddling from the rowing site in Bensdale all the way to Metung. They call themselves I called it the Sail to Sea Disability Challenge. They are a tremendous group of people who raise money for others who are disabled, particularly for people who are in a position where they need specialist equipment but actually can't provide it through their own funding, and they're a great group of people. So a great pleasure in sending them on their way. I did not participate in the paddle, however. And then the following Monday, a very good event, which was well attended by many people across the community, was the donation of the mobile stage by the Dolson family to the Shire, and there was a bit of thought about how this would go, but by the enthusiasm of those who attended and people lining up as participants of wanting to hire this stage across the Shire for the many events, I'd just really like to thank the Dolson family for that donation, and I look forward to seeing how well this is used for lots of outdoor events, because it is purpose-built for a band or for events, and as I said, I really do look forward to it. Now, since the last meeting, I did speak at that meeting about visiting Western Australia, and I've just done a bit more research on mining proposals, and it's disappointing to know that when we were in West Australia and visiting a mine in the Shire of Capel, that they failed, this is all actually on the internet, but they failed to tell us at the mine site that we visited that they'd had a breach of one of their dams, and the contaminants had got into the underground water table.
What is this part of your report?
Yes. Yeah, just to say that it was just disappointing that we weren't told of this. They appear now to have said it can be cleaned up, but could take up to 20 years to bring that water back to pure. And they'd also shown us some slides of a rehabilitated mine in Victoria, which unfortunately that's not the case, as I've found out, and this mine is just being used as a dump site. So it's just a little bit disappointing that on a fact-finding tour that we weren't given all the facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. The first item I'd like to talk about is community resilience. The Swifts Creek Bush Nursing Centre celebrated 100 years of community service. The official event was also attended by Councillors O'Connell, Buckley and Reeves. The celebration coincided with the official opening of the emergency vehicle accommodation facility. This facility was jointly funded through a generous donation of the Freemasons Foundation along with the Department of Health and Human Services. The next key thing was around celebrating diversity in culture and the arts, and the East Gippsland Art Gallery. Sophie Dew had Calling for Rain exhibition, quite fitting given that we are calling for rain. Sophie is born in France, lives in Sydney, and is very experienced artist, and we're lucky to have people like Sophie coming and exhibit. The exhibition was successful on the basis that by Sunday night we had received 10 mil rain across the Shire. We are lucky to have such talented artists like Sophie visit our region. Sophie has exhibited her art at the Great Alpine Gallery at Swifts Creek also. On a more serious note, protecting and nurturing our children to enable them to achieve their full potential. The launch of the Wellbeing of Children and Young People East Gippsland Report 2018. This launch was held at the Community Hub on Monday the 26th of March. The report updates 24 key indicators identified by the community that help tell us how well children and young people are doing in East Gippsland. The previous report was published in late 2013. The report was launched by Save the Children CEO Paul Ronalds. The importance and significance of gathering and sharing such key data about our young people and children gives us the opportunity to compare these statistics against the 2013 data set. The statistics gives us an East Gippsland regional snapshot on how we compare across the state and Australia. There are some serious negative bad trends for our region relating to bullying. The collecting of such critical data allows us to know how we are currently performing, and more importantly, in my opinion, gives us and our partner agencies the opportunity to identify priority areas and do something about it. What gets measured gets done. I have a copy of the report in my office for councillors to read. The next item was an advocacy trip to the Snowy Monaro Regional Council and a visit to the Country University's centre in the Snowy Monaro. Country University's Cooma has been operational for almost 5 years, and that time has seen 190 students registered to use the centre, studying 50 undergraduate degrees and 44 postgraduate degrees from 30 different universities. The centre has also hosted over 700 students sitting exams and facilitated 1,400 students attending face-to-face tutorials. I believe this tertiary hub model would be a game changer for our region in relation to uptake of young people and mature age students wanting to study and further either their career or a changing career, or more importantly, getting a degree if that's their desire. Our East Gippsland statistics for our young people taking up tertiary studies is extremely low compared to the state and the Australian averages. The other damning statistic is the high number of students that drop out after their first year of studies. The centre at Cooma is sponsored by the Snowy Monaro Regional Council, who provide the building and site for the facility, and sponsored by Snowy Hydro and a number of other corporate supporters. The facility offers 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to midnight support to students, flexibility to study any course from any university in your own time, independent study, supported degrees, dedicated study zones, 18 computer workstations, BYO device facilities and hotspots, extra fast internet and Wi-Fi, printing facilities and video conferencing. I'd like to ask our CEO and staff to contact Duncan Taylor, CEO of Country Universities, and extend an invitation for Duncan to come over and do a presentation to one of our councillor briefing sessions at some point to see whether we could actually adopt a similar model here in East Gippsland. The other important advocacy role was the CEO and myself attended a number of meetings in Canberra this week. We met with Federal Minister for Regional Development and Local Government, the Honourable Dr John McVeigh, to discuss a number of key projects for the region and, more importantly, the Regional Growth Fund that he's just recently announced. Federal Member for Gippsland, Darren Chester, also supported the delegation. The opportunities and projects that were discussed range from current funding applications to strategic, innovative future projects, as identified in our recent Councillor Major Projects Workshop. Minister McVeigh gave us significantly strong feedback and support for our identified initiatives. He also commented favourably in relation to our advocacy style. He gave us a briefing on where applications are at the moment with Building Better Regions, which we have two currently being considered for funding. One is the Omeo mountain bike park, and the other is an important water augmentation project in relation to our industrial estate. We should know in 4 weeks how successful both those applications are. The other key message we took to Canberra that resonated with the Minister was that we have the opportunity at East Gippsland to create growth through cooperation with governments. Our advocacy efforts in the lead up to this year's Victorian state election. Thank you. Item 5.1 is a Stronger Communities report, 5.1.1, and there's a recommendation there. Over to you, Mr Waits.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, throughout the year, Council receives requests from residents who live on roads that are currently not maintained by Council to have those roads added to Council's road register and thereafter be maintained by Council. There are a number of criteria that Council officers use when assessing those requests, and today we have 5 such requests covering roads: Depot Road, or Golf Course Road in Omeo, Wongrabell Road at Genoa, Bluff Road at Now, Bays Track at Can River, and Upper Livingston Road at Omeo. Of those 5 roads, 4 have been recommended in this report for adding to the road register. The 5th, the one that's not being recommended, is Upper Livingston Road, and the reason that hasn't been recommended is one of the key criteria for adding roads to the public road register is that they serve a principal place of residence. That particular road doesn't, and there are numerous similar roads throughout the Shire that may access farming land, but not directly to residential properties or principal places of residence, and therefore Upper Livingston Road hasn't been recommended for inclusion. Two of the roads in the list will require some upgrading before council takes them on, and that is again a standard practice for roads that require some money to be spent to bring them up to a basic standard before council takes them on. So the recommendation before you today is that Wongrabell Road and Bluff Road be added to the road register without any further upgrading being required, that Depot Road and Bays Track be taken onto the road register once upgrading has been undertaken by the abutting landowner or the requesting landowner, and that Upper Livingston Road not be added to council's public road register. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr Waits. Any questions, councillors? There's a recommendation. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I'd like to move an amendment to the motion.
Councillor O'Connell would like to move an amendment.
I'd like to move an amendment that the Upper Livingston Road be added to the road register once it's been upgraded and completed to the council's satisfaction.
It's foreshadowing. It hasn't, the motion hasn't been done. So it's a foreshadowing motion.
It's a foreshadowing.
Should someone move the motion and then councillor O'Connell move the amendment? So to assist, I'm happy to move the motion.
So moved, councillor Ellis. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Reeves. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to move an amendment that Upper Livingston Road be added to the public road register once it's been upgraded to council satisfaction.
Do I have a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Buckley. Councillor O'Connell, would you like to speak to your amendment?
This came up to us last year, and I requested that this be included to the public road register. Currently, this road is graded to approximately the 11k mark. Historically, the road was graded beyond this point, the further 1.8 kilometre that is being requested. So at some point along there has been a change, I'm not sure why, so there is an inconsistency there. This road is supportive of a farmer, a business, being able to make his contribution to the economy, and as a Shire we should be encouraging our businesses to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Connell. Councillor Buckley, did you want to speak as a seconder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's other people along there, three. There's Lawler and Foster and another one, and they don't have permanent residence on them, and the road, the public road, goes right up to their place. And on this diagram here that I got from Tim Bull, actually himself, it roughly shows where those properties are, and it seems a little bit unfair that the same sort of situation is just a little bit further on to the south, to the southwest on Flanagan's, you know. And so I think it's a bit unfair that the three holders on the way in have got the benefit of a public road when Flanagan hasn't, because they're in the same situation. And there is a through connection too. It's only a hop, step and a jump from Flanagan's boundary up to, and there's an active track there. I know it's gated, but there's an active track. And I think in fairness to Flanagan, that I think that road should be put back on the register. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. Any further speakers? For, against? Councillor Ellis.
Brave soldier to speak against something in Omeo when you're in Omeo. But let's have a look at this in the cool of day. The report has previously been brought towards council, and my memory was that this piece of road only goes to a set of stockyards. It doesn't go to a primary place of residence, which is the core reason why we put a track, or a permit, I should say, I'm getting tongue-tied here, permit roads to be added to our register. there's been no justification for Mr Flanagan's cattle yards to be added to our roads register. It's contrary to the will of our policy in relation to this matter. It would open a Pandora's box of applications should we allow just this simple, what seems to be just a simple little request to a decent man. That being the case, I cannot support the amendment, and I urge other councillors to reject the application before us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Any other speakers? Against? Councillor Reeves?
Look, ladies and gentlemen, I have to agree with Councillor Ellis. I think that there are several thousand kilometres of roads potentially that could end up on our road register. And it's okay if we're happy to have continuously increasing rates and pay for them, but we have to make that judgment as well around 1.8 kilometres here, there, 20 times 1.8 kilometres. So project that we're up against, and the councillors, I think we just need to stop, draw breath, and we have to sometimes make the hard decisions about these matters and have a metric around them, and we have that, which is a principal place of residence. And when we have that, I think we should respect that policy. Otherwise, we run into problems. And as Councillor Ellis said, a Pandora's box.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Any further speakers?
Just a question, Mr Mayor. Would I have the right of reply to those comments?
The mover would.
Councillor.
Thank you. Just that it seemed to me that $1 million was a fair bit of money to spend on a short stretch of road that's already made up. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Buck. Right of reply, Councillor O'Connell.
I appreciate the comments of Councillor Alison Reeves, and they do make a fair point. However, this does highlight the inconsistency because, as Councillor Buckley said, there is no principal place of residence beyond where that road is graded. So why does it stop where it does? And historically, this was graded. It changed sometime after amalgamation. I'm not sure why. But if we're going to be throwing around figures, we do pay $1 million for a ferry that we don't get to use. So I think it's a fair point to include yes. So that's my...
Thanks, Councillor O'Connell. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. I'm now going... All those against the amendment? 5 against. The amendment is lost. So now we get to the actual motion, which is the recommendation. Any further speakers?
I think I best say something to the motion. You know, like seeing the ferry's been raised, I'm on dangerous grounds here. I certainly know that I am in Omeo. Look, the report by Mr Waits is to the point. The issues and considerations have been raised by Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Buckley to add an additional road to the register. Councillors, we manage over 3,000 kilometres of roadways. We have an outstanding amount of work to be done on those roadways. We have to be careful managers of the expenses and the expansion of those roadways. The report is reasonable. The arguments for the other 3 roads are valid, and therefore I recommend that you adopt the recommendation of Mr Waits. Thank you.
Is any further speakers, councillors? I'll therefore put the recommendation. All those in favour? 1, 2, 5 in favour. Against? 3 against. Thank you. Item 5.1.2, Ms Nelson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report is presented to provide council and the community with an update in respect to the activities of our Disability Advisory Committee It's a requirement of Commonwealth legislation that we have a disability advisory committee, or organisations like councils do. The focus of the committee is on ensuring that council's own practice and way of working is constantly improving accessibility, given all of the work that we do and the services that we deliver into the community and the leadership role that council has in improving people's understanding of diversity and inclusiveness and accessibility. So the report that's attached to this agenda item has been prepared with input from our Disability Advisory Committee, working together with the council staff, so it's a collaborative effort that you're seeing. And it provides a really good update in respect to outcomes that have been achieved over the last 2 years, and you'll see that there were 16 initiatives mentioned in the report. A significant focus of the committee has been to work on reducing barriers that prevent people with a disability participating in economic activities and social life, and that so they participate in the social activities in the community. And the priorities for the next 12 months continue to focus on improving the reduction of barriers to people for employment and participation in employment and educational opportunities, and also to work to make sure that our community is well positioned to transition to the new National Disability Insurance Scheme. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ms Nelson. Questions, councillors? No questions. We do have a recommendation before us. Do we have a mover? Yeah. Councillor Ellis, seconded Councillor Toohey. Speakers?
This piece of work is particularly important for our community as a whole. Councils has discussed and debated and read this document over a period of 12 months or longer, and as a member of this particular committee, I can only commend the report and the policies to council, and just look forward to its ambitions being achieved over the coming term of this council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Toohey, do you want to speak?
Just to say that, that this has been a great report to read, very comprehensive, and has come up with some very good outcomes, which is very pleasing.
Any speakers against? Any further speakers for? Councillor Reeves.
Well, thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillors, it's always a measure of our community as to how we treat those in greatest need, and to have a report like this and a guide for us, a moral guide, if you like, almost like a third chamber, if you like, to keep an eye on what we do to ensure that we are an inclusive community is very important, and I thank the committee for their work.
Thanks, Councillor Reeves. Any further speakers? I'll therefore put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.2.1 is the adoption of the draft Livingston Park Management Plan for Omeo. And in attendance we have Ms Weigel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I think it's quite appropriate that we bring this report to the April meeting, given that this meeting is being held in Omeo and Livingston Park is such an important asset for the Omeo community. As well aware, it's had a long history as being an important part of the fabric of the Omeo community and a very important recreational point for the community. And before that, it was important as part of the gold mining heritage of this area. Councillors, as part of that importance, and we've also heard from Mr Holton earlier in the meeting about the plans for an Omeo mountain bike trail and the importance of this new activity and this new economic generation could bring for Omeo. Livingston Park is a really important part of that Omeo mountain bike trail proposal. It's where a lot of the trails would head off from, and also brings a place where the riders can congregate in town at the end of it. So it has both a current use, a potential future use, and a lot of history. For a lot of years, the management of the Livingston Park, which is all Crown land, but some is managed by ourselves, some is managed by DELP, and some is managed by Parks Victoria, was a little ad hoc, to say the least. Therefore, in 2009, a management plan was developed, and that was used to guide some of the betterment projects that took place after flooding in 2012. In 2016, with great community input, the plan was reviewed, and the management plan that you have before us is an outcome of both the learnings from the first management plan and the community consultation. Many of the recommended actions in the plan are directly looking at mitigating risk, improving amenity, improving accessibility, and ensuring that the park has greater resilience into the future to withstand future natural disaster events should they occur. It's a great piece of work, and I believe the work that has gone into it will show it will be well delivered into the future. The recommendations are quite extensive and really cover a lot of activities. Some is the responsibility of council, but some is the responsibility of other agencies. However, some of the high priority actions are really around the trails and the pool that you saw this morning, which does need quite a bit of work. So the recommendations do have some high priority actions which are valued at about 1.1 million, which, as Ms Nelson said earlier in the day, we will need to be starting to look at funding opportunities to attract that funding. Part of that is having an adopted plan, which is a plan that's adopted by council. Therefore, the recommendation in the report to you today is to adopt the Livingston Park Management Plan as revised in 2018, and note that the recommendations would be subject to our normal budgetary and business planning processes. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Questions from councillors? Councillor O'Connell.
Thanks, Ms Weigel. It's great to have this report finally coming to us. The high priority actions are really important, and are you able to give a timeline? I know we're subject to budgetary conditions and external funding, but it would be good to know if there's a timeline that you have in mind as to when these might be completed.
Some of them will be built into the mountain bike plans itself, and some of those, the funding opportunities that have been spoken about already, build into and look at some of the opportunities. We're also meeting on a regular basis with state and federal funding bodies to look at the opportunities that arise. We're talking to Regional Development Victoria about some of the opportunities in here, and we'll also be working with Sport and Recreation Victoria to see if there may be some opportunities around the funding of the pool through that. Really, it's about us trying to get the right match with the funding program, and we're regularly meeting with funding bodies to try and do that. So I think that some of it is actually embedded in the budget that we already have for the mountain bike trails, and some of it we'll need to go out and source additional funding for.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Councillor O'Connell.
With, for example, the pool, is there further drafting works or, plans that would have to be completed prior to you getting funding?
As I think was mentioned on the walk around today, there's a need to work with Lifesaving Victoria, Sport and Recreation Victoria to make sure that the plans are robust and meet their funding requirements. So there is a little bit of additional work that needs to be done that would then put a funding application in really good stead. Yes.
Any further questions, councillors? Okay, we have a recommendation before us. Moved Councillor O'Connell, seconded Councillor White. The speakers, Councillor O'Connell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. As I said before, very happy to be moving this, moving to accept this adopted plan. It's been a long time in the making. There's some people in the gallery who have been a part of seeing this come to fruition and creating the park as we see it today. So I'm sure there'll be some very happy people to see that this is finally part of the council's plan and that can finally come to fruition. So thank you for getting it to end.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To say from this morning, it is a beautiful spot and nestled in beneath the township and then under the mount there, and I think the improvements that could be made would just make it even more popular to people passing through town and to those who live here. And as I said, watching that water just trickling down through there. It's a beautiful spot, and I'm much in favour of the improvements. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor White. Any further speakers, either against or for? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.2.2 is East Gippsland Planning Scheme Amendment 2018, and we have Mr. Holton. Oh, sorry, Ms. White. Jumped ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As councillors are well aware, the planning scheme is a really important document for council. As the planning authority, it is the document which guides planning decisions throughout the organisation. It sets the parameters for how land is developed, where land can develop, and what are the considerations around land development. So a very important document for us. As such, we are always looking at the document and the planning scheme and working our way through how we can improve it, how we can remove some of the red tape, how we can reduce the number of planning applications that may need to come forward, and how we can respond to changing circumstances. As well as those ongoing reviews, the state government also requires that within 12 months of a council plan being adopted, the planning scheme, and in particular the municipal strategic statement part of the planning scheme, is reviewed by council. So the report before you and the attachment is that review of the planning scheme amendment, of the planning scheme, which considers the approach we've taken is to look at the major planning issues that have been key drivers for change, to document the strategic work that has been completed during the review period, and to reaffirm our commitments to undertaking place-based planning scheme reviews to facilitate growth throughout all of our townships. As part of a planning scheme review like this, there's often a requirement to look at what they call the form and content, really go through line by line and say, change this and change that. With this approach, we actually haven't undertaken that because the state government is in the process of introducing what they're calling smart planning. And smart planning, they're saying, will introduce a whole lot of reforms to the planning scheme itself. So therefore, we saw that it was timely to consider those reforms before we recommend major changes to the way that the planning scheme is outlined and prepared and presented. We saw that we could undertake a lot of officer time undertaking that work to only have it overturned through a state government process. So therefore, we've looked at it really to make sure that we're maintaining our strategic focus in the planning scheme, ensure that we continue to own and have a commitment to making planning scheme amendments, and those are driven by a theory or an approach around continuous improvement, and to establish a framework moving forward. Part of that is to also, one of the recommendations you will note, councillors, is to introduce at least quarterly workshops with council so we can discuss not only the planning scheme amendments that are coming forward, but more generally what's happening in that planning space, that strategic planning space. So that is a new approach for us, and I believe is one that will work really well. The summary of the review really finds doing a lot of great work. We've had over 25 planning scheme amendments over the last 4 years. We've had a lot of submissions to state government and influenced the state's planning scheme and responded to things like the introduction of bushfire management overlays and things that are instigated by the state. So I think what we've found from the planning scheme review that there has been some great work, and it's important that we continue that work regardless of what the framework is that the planning scheme may look like into the future. So before you, councillors, are a series of recommendations. Some of those are sort of the cosmetics of making sure that we've, after you've considered and adopted hopefully adopted the review, it's provided to the Minister for Planning as per the requirements. Others are the recommendations around noting that we will continue to direct future improvement around these core areas of the planning scheme, and to hold these quarterly workshops with council. So I'm happy to take any questions on any bits of the review. It's quite a lengthy document itself, which again demonstrates how much work has been undertaken over the past 4 years.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Thank you to you and your team for presenting this report. Questions, councillors? If there's no questions, we have a recommendation before us. Have a mover. Councillor Reeves, seconded Councillor O'Connell. Speakers? No speakers. Okay. Councillor O'Connell.
Just for the benefit of the people in the gallery, thank you, Ms Weigel. It is a lot of hard work that's gone on into this report, and I'm just pleased to see that in your current and further strategic work that the scoping of the Omeo zoning land use has been added, and further work will be done in that in due course, but it will assist with future residential and industrial development for the town. So that's great. Thank you.
No further speakers. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.2.3, it's a proposal to end Section 173 Agreement AF 202923J, 72 Ashley Street, Paynesville. In attendance we have Mr Hollow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, this proposal to end the agreement at 72 Ashley Street, Paynesville will be familiar to you all, as Council provided in principle approval to move this process through its requirements under the Planning and Environment Act. Councillors, this agreement as it relates to 72 Ashley Street resulted from two previous large subdivision proposals on a greater site having to work together in terms of linking roads and the like. Unfortunately, the agreement prevents the land from being further subdivided, and in our view, there is no reason to prevent this lot from being further subdivided, as it is located within an appropriate central locality area for the township. It's within the edge of a growth corridor. It's close to community facilities such as Paynesville Primary School. Councillors, on that basis, it went to public consultation. There was no submissions for or against, and as such, council officers are of the view that for good planning reasons this agreement should be ended as it relates to that property. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr Hollow. Questions, councillors? Have the recommendation. If there's no questions, we need a mover. Moved Councillor Roberts, seconded Councillor Toohey. Any speakers? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 5.2.4 is a planning permit application 10/2018P, use and development of a convenience restaurant and takeaway food premises, alteration of access to a road zone, Category 1, and development of advertising signage at 426 and 430 Main Street, Bairnsdale. Mr Hollow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, once again, this application will be familiar to you as it was subject to a planning consultation meeting that took place earlier this year. The proposal over three current lots being 426, 428 and 430 Main Street, Bairnsdale. It provides for a convenience restaurant, a takeaway food premises, associated car parking, vehicle access, advertising signage and alteration to access to Main Street, which is a Vic Road.
Mr Hollow, can you just hold?
To assist the gentleman, Mr Mayor, I believe Councillor Buckley needs to make a declaration.
Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a tiny bit controversial. The advice I got before that I didn't really have a conflict of interest in this, but I think I may have, so I would prefer to leave the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you.
Yeah. Please continue, Mr Hollow. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, you will recall that this application was subject to a planning consultation meeting. The main concerns of the 7 objectives was amenity-based concerns, as well as some concerns about traffic safety. The application was referred to numerous agencies, including Vic Roads, who did not object to the proposal, but in the Vic Roads case, requested some conditions to be placed on a notice of decision to grant a permit should one be issued. Councillors, we have recommended that the application be supported with the inclusion of conditions to address matters such as noise impacts, lighting impacts, traffic requirements, car parking, loading and unloading times and the like. And we believe that with the inclusion of these conditions, we'll have an application and a proposal which is consistent with the East Gippsland planning scheme. On that basis, councillors, there is a recommendation for approval. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr Hollow. Questions, councillors? There's no questions. We have a recommendation. Do we have a mover for?
Happy to move the motion for councillors.
Move Councillor Ellis. We have a second. Councillor Toohey. Speakers.
The report provided to council has been quite detailed in its content. It's another opportunity for the City of Bensdale to improve its retail sector. It's been considered in all aspects with good consultation with the neighbourhood surrounding the proponent's application. I recommend the application to council.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Toohey, would you like to speak as a second? No? Any further speakers? Councillor Reeves.
I'm happy to speak to it too, Mr Mayor. I understand the concerns that were raised with the objections, but I also acknowledge the conditions that have been placed on the recommendation, and that should allay the concern. For that streetscape, I think it's the right place for it. Thanks, Mr Hollows.
Thanks, Councillor Reeves. If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Could somebody retrieve Councillor Buckley? Thank you.
At your leisure, man.
Item 5.3.1. It's a planning permit application delegations policy. Mr Holton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This policy was developed at the request of councillors earlier this year. The policy deals with the framework for decision making in respect of the planning permit application, both by officers under delegation and when those matters are referred to this chamber for decision. The policy introduces new triggers for the conduct of a PCM. Sorry about that. The policy introduces new triggers for the conduct of a planning meeting, as well as extending the number of objections received before a matter will be referred to council for consideration. However, it also introduces a new mediation meeting that would be conducted should there be more than 5 objections or less than 10 in respect of a planning permit application. It lays out very clearly the grounds under which councillors may call in a planning permit application for consideration before the chamber, and also outlines a process whereby officers would provide information to the councillors in order to assist them to make their decisions around calling in or not calling in. The policy is quite comprehensive and replaces two motions that were adopted by council something like 8 years apart. And it sets out the whole process quite clearly in a policy document. And as with all policy documents, the recommendation is quite clear, and I'm happy to take questions.
Questions, councillors? Councillor White.
Mr Mayor, question then on your last comment about it being reviewed quite regularly. Is there a time frame, please?
Generally, the review date, a policy can be reviewed at, 12-month intervals. Generally, all the policies are reviewed at the beginning of the life of a council.
Any further questions? Okay, councillors, we have a recommendation before us. Do we have a mover? Councillor Reeves, seconded Councillor O'Connell. Speakers.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I just commend the work done by officers at our request to find best practice from examples and situations both in the state and outside the state. And councillors, I really commend this work and hope that you will vote for it. It allows for transparency. As Mr Holton noted, it will embed some new processes that allow councillors to have greater control, to be vested in those decisions. And it also overcomes, I think, some confusions over some triggers in the past. It also allows us to acknowledge some of the planning applications that have community interest and good community outcomes as a result, not just that might be controversial, but also that might be of significance to our community. This is a great outcome, and councillors, we should celebrate this and vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor O'Connell.
I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Reeves has spoken about. It's a great policy and procedure presented to us this afternoon. Thank you to Mr Holton and his team for working on this lengthy document. The support here today will show a clear, strong message to our community in East Gippsland that Council has adopted best practice, and it will enable us to get on with business in a fair and equitable way. And our process will be a business and community critical infrastructure enabler. Importantly, Council will be briefed on significant planning permits, as Councillor Reeves said, not just a monetary value, but public value and community interest. And the clear, concise delegation authorities relating to planning permits and PCMs now includes the mediation step prior to the PCM, which is an important step. So I again urge you to all support this. Thank you.
Is there any further speakers? Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for this opportunity to speak against this recommendation before Council. Councillors, I've read through the reports and the recommendations contained in the supporting report to the policies. Although it's pleasing to see the work that has been done in relation to what is a complex matter. I can draw your attention back to the fact that this issue was brought by me to Council because of what I term the hope scandal, where inappropriate action was taken, in my view, in relation to failure to provide proper and clear transparency in the handling of a significant planning application that will impact on, for good and for bad, but for good primarily, I assume, on this community. The recommendations in the report do not resolve the issues raised by the 3 or more trigger. The actions of the person involved in the hoax scandal in announcing the outcomes of it, or expected outcomes of the planning application, cannot be addressed by the recommendations in this report. So even though it's goodwill, we still won't be able to maintain that strength of transparency that Councillor Reeves referred to. The extension of the 10 or more, it takes away the role of Council as a mediator, and it comes back to 2 or more. The understanding of all issues of importance that come before us as a council will not be shared with the total council group. So for a number of reasons, and in the process of saying this, I acknowledge the work that's been done, but it's been rushed through in a 3-month period without wider access to perhaps interstate or even overseas planning activities. I just don't know where these recommendations come. They could be parochial in the sense of being Gippsland based. I just don't know that. So what I'm saying to you is please support me in rejecting this outcome and ask the officers to return to their research and come back with something. The theme is good because we do need to improve our handling of our planning processes, but we still have that problem of transparency and we need to address that as a prime cause. So for those reasons, Mr Mayor, I ask that the matter be rejected. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Speaker for the motion? Any further speakers against the motion? The mover like the right reply.
Thanks. Councillors, respectfully, Councillor Ellis, I just want on the record that I don't think there was any such thing as a hope scandal. I think that there is a hope opportunity and a bright light of hope that was raised with us when that planning matter was approved. And I think that there is confusion around the hope scandal or hope opportunity and this planning matter that is before us now. And I think we should separate the two. There was no scandal around the Hope Centre and their planning. Let's get that on the record again, that planning matter was dealt with under delegation as it should have been. And that was quite appropriate. This new delegations policy will allow councillors who find those matters of such great importance and opportunity for the community to actually raise them and to raise their status and to ensure that the community is aware of them. So it is a great opportunity for us. There's no scandal. And secondly, on the matter of it being rushed through, well, I don't think that there was anything more rushed than the notice of motion that was put before us at that meeting to change that delegation policy or that trigger policy. That was the most rushed motion that I have ever seen. And I spoke quite passionately against it, and I urged councillors at the time to vote it down, and you didn't. So here's your opportunity to redress that. And we have a very well-considered, not rushed, well-considered, well-researched policy that will be of benefit to the community. And I'm sure we will see the 50 signatories again writing to the paper thanking us for this considered new policy. Please, thanks, councillors.
Okay, councillors, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. 6-4, 2 against. Thank you. Item 5.3.2. It's a proposed new lease arrangement, 100 Langford Parade, Painesville. Of Ms Cashman in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The report before you is seeking Council's approval to terminate the current lease we have with Painesville and District Kindergarten Incorporated and reissue a new agreement with the management agent, which is now in place. So Painesville Kindergarten Incorporated has been the lessee of the site of 100 Langford Parade, Painesville, for a number of years. Council officers have been advised that Painesville Kindergarten Incorporated is no longer an operating entity within its own right. And with that entity in existence, the association is currently not performing the management and governance duties of that kindergarten anymore. In early 2015, council officers became aware that the Uniting Church in Australia Property Trust was in process of becoming the managing agent of that kindergarten. United committed to undertaking the drafting of the lease document in place. However, that did not eventuate. So council has prepared the lease arrangement, and now we have that presented to you today. The expiry date, we have left all the lease arrangements as is in comparison with the current lease agreement, except for the expiry date. At present, Uniting hold 5 kindergarten leases throughout the Shire, all of those expiring on the 30th of June 2028. So with that in mind, we have drafted the new proposed lease for you. This lease will need to be publicly advertised in accordance with Section 190 of the Local Government Act. And should we receive any submissions objecting to that lease, then we will undertake a Section 223 process if required. So if there are no further questions, may I ask Council to approve the recommendations before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Cashman. Council's questions? There's no questions. We have a recommendation before us. Do we have a mover? Councillor Roberts, second. Councillor Toohey. The speakers? Didn't speak. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. 5.3.3. It's proposed lease of land, Part 59 Main Road, Paynesville, to Optus Mobile Proprietary Limited. Ms Cashman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council has been approached by the Catalyst Group on behalf of Optus Mobile Proprietary Limited in respect of establishing a telecommunications facility in Paynesville. The facility proposed includes a tower and equipment cabinet fenced in a surrounding compound. The land at 59 Main Road, Paynesville, has been identified as the potentially suitable site, and this being the AJ Freeman Reserve. Some of you may be aware that this particular reserve is home to a number of sporting clubs. The area that we're seeking to lease to Optus Proprietary Limited is 82.88 metres squared, and that we are looking to formalise a lease for 20 years so that that particular tower can be erected and used for the community. Again, this is another lease where we will have to publicly advertise the agreement in accordance with Section 190. And again, if we receive any submissions, then we will be bringing that to a Section 223 meeting per the report. So if there's any other questions or not, I ask that Council receive those recommendations and ask you to consider those. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Cashman. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Rees.
Ms Cashman, thanks for that. You mentioned that the site is on a rec reserve, is that right? And who are the users of that rec reserve? Can you just fill me in on that, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Rees. I believe at the moment the Paynesville Tennis Club and the Paynesville Cricket Club are the main constituents on that oval.
Yes,
Ms Cashman, will they be any beneficiaries of this lease payment?
I don't believe, Councillor Rees, that that is the case at the moment.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Ellis.
If I may, Mr Mayor, take up on Councillor Rees' point. Well, we're here on a recreational reserve right now, and there's a tower here. Does this particular location receive any benefit from the rental monies that come in from Optus and Telstra for those sort of facilities? And I believe there are other examples throughout the Shire. I'm just surprised.
Sorry, councillors, the short answer to that is no. Council's policy is that rentals that are received from these kind of infrastructure facilities do not go back to the Recreation Reserve Committee management on which they sit. However, I might pass across to Ms Nelson to just explain what happens with this particular scenario.
The policy that Council most recently adopted in respect to this matter makes it abundantly clear that rental income from Council-owned property, effectively, or managed property on behalf of the committee does not go back to that committee. And there are good reasons why that happens, because we fund committees to look after land on our behalf and on behalf of the community. Not all reserves have an external funding source just because they happen to be located well for communications towers. So that rental money comes back to the organisation as a whole, and it's distributed across all of the committees of management across the Shire. In the case of Omeo, there was some confusion about whether the rental would come back directly to this reserve, and in good faith, council has entered into another arrangement, another 3-year arrangement with this particular committee as a result of the expectations that were created falsely that the income would come back to them on a permanent basis. So council's committed, I think it's $5,000 a year for 3 years as a result of that confusion.
Is there any further questions, council? So no further questions. There is a recommendation before us. Moved Councillor Toohey, seconded Councillor O'Connell. Any speakers? Councillor Toohey.
So, as I understand, what council does do is not return any profit from leasing this land, but council funds all of these recreational reserves anyway as part of our normal course of events. So, more than happy to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Is there any further speakers? I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Unanimously. Item 5.3.4, it's an instrument of delegation, council to members of staff. Ms. Cashman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Before you, councillors, is the revised instrument of delegation named S6 for council's consideration and adoption. This is just a routine update of those particular delegations in accordance with advice we received from Maddox solicitors. In this report and the updates that have been made, there's a new power that has been inserted in regards to the Food Act 1984. In regards to a temporary or mobile food premises being able to be ordered to not keep or be used for the sale, handling or preparation of any food. Subsequently, a new power has been inserted under the Section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act, but that purely relates to the Yarra Strategic Plan and the planning scheme that relates to the Yarra River, so probably not particularly our patch. So there's been some minor corrections made to officer titles throughout that document, and I hope that everything else that you've seen there is in order. Happy to field any questions on the routine update of our instrument of delegation. Thank you.
Questions, councillors? Moved Councillor Ellis. We have a seconder. Councillor Toohey. Thank you. Speakers?
The delegations are necessary for the effective carrying out of the business of local government in East Gippsland. It's a routine delegation and should be supported. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. So item 5.3.5 is amendment to council meeting schedule 2018. Never mind.
Mr Mayor, we would like to add a slight amendment to number 1, where it says draft budget contract con 218-1240 boardwalk construction works Meetung Road, Meetung. We've been able to bring that, do the evaluation of that contract. It's a rather large one for Meetung, and we'd just like to put that in the special council meeting as well.
So council's aware the CEO is wanting to add the Meetung boardwalk in this recommendation. Yes.
I guess there's always got to be a party, Peter. Well, I imagine this is a capital works program of some consequence and council's not aware of any of the detail. Sorry? Sorry.
Councillors, you'll have a briefing on that project before the council meeting on the 17th, is it?
Yeah. What we're obviously discussing item 5.3.5, which is seeking approval from council to conduct a special council meeting. We have foreshadowed in the report that there are two specific items we want to discuss on the 17th of April, should council agree to that special council meeting being held. What the CEO is seeking to do is add a further one, being this contract for the Metung Boardwalk.
Very good. Thank you, and apologies to Mr CEO. I misinterpreted what he said. He took it that he was wanting to introduce it into today's meeting, and that's my mistake. I just about had kittens.
Special meeting. We clear on that now? Is it?
Yeah.
Is there any other questions?
Is that enough time for it? Okay.
If there's no questions, there is the recommendation. Do I have a mover?
Happy to
Move Councillor Rees.
amendment as suggested by the CEO.
Seconded Councillor Toohey.
Do you want that on the record?
I think that's clear. Thank you, councillor.
Speakers?
No.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Before you go to camera, can you, I think we said we're going to have afternoon tea, but we need to go to camera. So, yes, we're going to have to ask the people to go out and then come back in.
So we do need to, first of all, Mr CEO, is there any urgent business?
None, Mr Mayor.
Item 7 is confidential business, and we need to go into in-camera to discuss those items.
I think Councillor Buckley wants to raise something.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything about urgent business. Did you mention that?
Yes, I did. I asked if there was any urgent business.
Yeah, he didn't say urgent and other business, he just said urgent business.
Oh, okay. I missed that. I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, but I do have, it's definitely not urgent, but I do want to make a comment about that because urgent business is a pretty hard sort of judgment to make, collectively. And I think it should be changed back to just general business like it used to be in the past. And anyway, I'll deal with that at the next meeting, maybe with a motion, and that'll cover that particular issue. But while I've got the floor, I'd just like to say thanks to the locals that have turned up and shown a rare interest in it sometimes. So thank you very much for coming and to see us. Thank you.
So just for the benefit of the gallery, we will need to close the meeting for a short moment just to discuss some contractual stuff, and then we'll reopen the meeting and then close off the meeting, and you're invited for afternoon tea. So, yeah, so unfortunately, momentarily, we need to clear the gallery.